Welcome to Alpha Recaps. Don't forget to subscribe please. Year 2024. Philadelphia City is just a city with abandoned buildings and fires on the streets. Not a single survivor can be seen in the city. Year is 1988 and a mysterious hooded man can be seen walks through the Philadelphia city. In the meantime, a pianist, a cook, and a bus driver are going via their usual nights while abruptly they start bleeding from all their orifices before all of them die on the same time. The bus crashes and a book falls, revealing the driver had been studying American Patriot. Police officer Thomas is beginning his shift soon. However, before leaving home, he cooks a quick breakfast for his pregnant spouse Jean. After meeting together with his partner Maddox, they go to see the bus crash, wherein Thomas's brother-in-law and head detective Holt is already working. When they take a look at the body, they discover pieces of the driver's brain on the floor and 3 bizarre puncture wounds on her neck. Later on, they take a look at on the pianist and the prepared dinner, finding exactly the same situation, mind chunks and 3 puncture wounds. Later, Thomas and Maddox go to see the doctor in charge of the post-mortem, who explains the injuries were injection sites deep enough to affect the vertebrae, but nobody within the lab can identify the toxic substance used in this injection. Then, they exit to grab a meal, and Thomas takes the chance to buy a bracelet for Jean. Their dinner is interrupted by means of a call from a cop that has discovered another person with those 3 puncture wounds. However, this one remains alive. The pair rushes to the club in which Holt is coming for interrogation too, and they examine that this girl has been attacked by a black lady with a blue hoodie and a bloody hand. Before she can offer more facts, although she dies the same way all of the others did, the police force starts interrogating each black woman they can locate, and thanks to a few witnesses, they get an identikit. Soon they locate the location in which the murderer was last seen, and Thomas and Maddox end up coming across her by mere chance. Her call is Rhea and she runs to hide in the subway station, so the police officers follow her there, missing when the radio inside the car announces Jean is going into labor. Thomas finds an empty futuristic weapon at the floor that seems like the thing Rhea used for the injections. However, it is Maddox the one that finds her first. Rhea easily fights him off and breaks his leg before running off. However, the noise they make is sufficient for Thomas to locate them. He targets his gun at her, only to freeze while she begins speaking mysterious words. Rhea is aware of his name and says that is where it takes place. She also congratulates him on his new daughter and apologizes for Maddox, claiming she didn't mean to. Thomas does not want to listen it and tries to arrest her. However, Rhea fights him off and handcuffs him to a bench. Remembering he still has her weapon, Thomas hits her with it, and Rhea falls back, dying when the train passes by. Taking the case as closed, Thomas leaves the station and another officer tells him about his wife. Thomas rushes to the clinic, wherein he's approached by some other cop that tells him Rhea had no ID or fingerprint matches. She was a nobody. The only thing on her was a few weird keys. The officer also asks Thomas for his revolver, because Rhea had a bullet from a service gun on her hand. That's strange because not one of the police officers at the scene of the crime fired their guns. Then, Thomas is came to know by a nurse that tells him Jean is having problem giving birth and is hemorrhaging. Thomas rushes to her side and puts the bracelet on her wrist. However, his presence isn't enough. Moments later, the docs deliver Thomas and Holt the information. The newborn is fine, but Jean regrettably died. 9 years later, in 1997, Thomas, who is now a detective, has taken the break to spend it together with his daughter Amy on her birthday. Amy has been carrying her mother's bracelet since she was a child, and every year Thomas presents her a brand new charm for it. Their first stop is on the cemetery to leave a few flowers on Jean's grave, and Thomas is greatly surprised to see a person had already been there and left flowers as well. Next, they must be going to the zoo. However, Thomas receives an emergency call, and since it's so crucial, he leaves Amy with another cop for a moment while taking a look at the new crime. Maddox is there too, walking with a limp now, and swearing he wasn't the one to leave flowers for Jean earlier. The reason why Thomas was called is that some other body with 3 wound punctures has shown up, and due to the fact today it's the anniversary, it cannot be a coincidence. This time the victim is a professor of politics, and the bizarre poison has been used again. That is unusual because no longer even the police labs could figure out what it was. Holt, who is now a lieutenant, shows up as well, and after telling Thomas he did not leave flowers for Jean either, they check the security cameras and find someone wearing the same hoodie as Rhea. The officers decide to blame it on a copycat. However, Thomas isn't certain and drags Amy with him back to the station to reopen the old case. They never checked out the clues carefully because with Rhea dead, the case was closed. However, now it is time to place the puzzle pieces collectively. Thomas sends the keys they had observed to be analyzed at the same time as he learns more bodies with the identical wounds had been found, and he comes to a decision to stay on the station and work at the case, so Amy's birthday trip is cancelled. cancelled. They cannot locate any connection among all of the victims. But Thomas starts to worry when he realizes the copycat has an injured hand like Rhea. But they never made that detail public. The test results come in, displaying that the keys belong to an plane common in small airfields manufactured in 1996, which makes no sense because they determined these keys in 1988. Only one airfield within the area has that kind of aircraft, so Thomas leaves Amy with an officer to go check it out. On his way out, although he bumps into Dr. Rao, who points out the case has a few coincidences along with his research. The murders fit a specific lunar perigee known as a blood moon, which is theorized to open a bridge into time travel. However, Thomas and Maddox don't take him seriously. After they make it to the airfield, they locate it closed. However, Thomas can see a light within the building and decides to sneak in anyway. The clerk denies having seen anybody this night. However, Thomas can tell he is behaving awkwardly and nervously. As a consequence, he tries to speak with him through notes because he suspects he's being held hostage. His bet is accurate. However, before he can do anything about it, Rhea shows up next to him, alive and no longer having aged a day. Even as pointing her gun at him, she makes Thomas drop the weapon, then orders the clerk to tie him up. With the clerk between him and Rhea as cover, Thomas takes the chance to take out his smartphone and call Maddox so he can listen what is occurring before he is tied up to a chair. Next, Rhea asks for plane keys, and while the clerk is going to grab them, he takes out his own weapon to defend himself, except Rhea is quick to act and knocks him out to grab the weapon for herself. All at once, she's startled by Maddox showing up at the back of her and she accidentally shoots him, killing him without meaning to, which explains the apology she gave Thomas 9 years in the past. A backup party led by Holt is already arriving on the airfield, so Rhea drags Thomas away with her in a plane. Thomas passes out and dreams of Jean before Rhea wakes him up to inform him to stop chasing her because she's doing all this to save people's lives. The cause why she's alive is that each 9 years when the moon sets, she can come back. However, not for long. She doesn't need to explain extra because Thomas wishes to stop and go back home to his daughter, but since he refuses, Rhea pushes him out of the aircraft and into the water. Thomas swims to the shore and finds the crashed aircraft, yet no Rhea in sight. In the morning, after Holt scolds him for being reckless, Thomas tells him they might not find Rhea's body because she's most likely a time traveler from the future. 9 years later in 2006, Thomas is digging out the grave of a person called Harold Nowak, whose death had been dismissed as an addiction, but Thomas now reveals the 3 wound punctures on his skeleton. He has become so passionate about this case that he left the force and have become a private investigator to figure out the mystery behind Rhea. He lives in his automobile and has a radio hooked to the police force's frequency as a way to hold an ear out for any clues. Thomas has additionally begun studying about the moon and its energies while looking for medical Dr. Rao, but he has absolutely disappeared. After checking Nowak's name on a list, Thomas visits the widow, who tells him Nowak used to run a white nationalist militia group. Nowak's ex Heather used to work with him, so Thomas writes her name down before asking for a list of the participants of this organization. This list is the connection he's been missing because on it he finds the names of many of Rhea's victims. In a while, Thomas goes to pick Amy up at school. Nowadays she's living with Holt and his wife and she does not see her father much. In fact, she disapproves of this lifestyle of his. Still, she tries to tell her about any news in her life, consisting of the mention of a boyfriend that Thomas does not remember, although he has met him before. Then, Thomas drops Amy at her home, however not without giving her a birthday gift, which is another charm. Regrettably, Amy stopped wearing the bracelet ages ago, and Thomas didn't even know. Next, Thomas visits Jean's grave before getting together with Holt at a restaurant to show him the brand new clues he has found. Thomas thinks Rhea is killing all the members of this organization with a sophisticated poison from the future that may be activated remotely, and she's shifting backward in time at the same time as the rest of the world moves forward, which explains why Thomas noticed her die and then reappear simply fine, and why she had that records about him. Thomas just wants Holt to help him get Heather's address. However, Holt thinks he is crazy and dismisses the time-traveling theory. Now not willing to surrender, but Thomas pretends to cry and accept he's in a bad mental health state, apologizing for his moves. Holt hugs him and guarantees to help him find a therapist, and Thomas takes the chance to steal his badge. As soon as Holt is gone, Thomas pretends to be him and calls the station to ask for Heather's information from the system. Sadly, by the time Thomas makes it to Heather's place, she's already dead, and she's were given the identical bleeding and 3 wound punctures. All at once, Rhea jumps out of the house and Thomas tries to shoot her, wounding her hand with one of his bullets as it became previously found on her dead body. Rhea escapes on a motorbike, so Thomas steals a truck and follows her to the same seaside where she had crashed the aircraft through entering a sewer pipe. Thomas reveals the location where Rhea hides her time machine, but before he can do something, she activates it and gets away, while Thomas leaves the sewer hole, and his guys are looking forward to him to arrest him, not believing his crazy story about a time traveler. From afar, Rao watches this whole scene. 9 years later in 2015, Rao has ultimately completed working on the poison that might later be used by Rhea by testing it on pigs. Thomas have been right, it's activated remotely from a computer and is the reason why all of the victims die at the same time. His lab is close to the same shore with the sewer pipe, and the security cameras show him that today Thomas is making camp at the beach because he knows it's the anniversary and Rhea should be coming. While waiting, Thomas gets a call from Amy telling him that despite the fact that they barely see each other in recent times, she'd like him to be there when she has her toddler. He barely has time to consider what to do when all of a sudden his face is covered and he is knocked out. When he wakes up, Thomas reveals himself in Rao's van with all of the dead pigs. Rao himself is using and explaining that it's thanks to Thomas's investigation that he understood Rhea is saving the world and she's the culmination of his very own research. He will be retaining Thomas locked for a few days so Rhea can do her thing. Then Rao guarantees to let him go. Thomas does not accept this plan though, and he jumps on Rao to try to make him stop the van. Alternatively, the car finally ends up crashing and Thomas gets to run away. Some moments later on the seashore, Rhea shows up after time traveling for the first time, and Thomas is there looking forward to her. He intends to kill her so she can't keep traveling back. That way the murders won't happen and he may not emerge as this obsessed shell of a person. Rhea explains he won't do that because she's known him her entire life. In fact, Thomas was the only that told her to take this job. Then, Rhea takes off her bracelet, revealing she's Thomas's granddaughter. Defined by the reality Amy married a black guy. Thomas puts his gun down and asks Rhea to stop him from killing her in the past, but she can't because it's already occurred and time traveling is a one-way journey. Then, Rhea asks Thomas to go home and spend time with Amy while she finishes her venture. It all started while Rhea was 9 and a person detonated a van with explosives that killed 11,000 humans. This triggered a series of occasions that resulted in a civil war that killed hundreds of thousands and left the country in ruins. That is why Rhea volunteered to go back and shoot all of the members of the militia organization with the doctor's special poison, which is activated through an old Rao in the future, resetting the complete timeline. In the present, Thomas makes it to the hospital just in time, and Holt is satisfied to see he is finally chosen family over work. Thomas receives to hold the newborn Rhea for the first time, and he places the bracelet round her tiny wrist. Don't forget to like and subscribe.